As Unitarian Universalists, we believe truth is larger than any one book or way. Religion and science go hand in hand, and integrity requires freedom of conscience. Diversity is something to celebrate, and in the struggle for justice, we come alive. Our highest aspiration and calling is love. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever path you are on, you are welcome here.
Take courage, friends. The way is often hard, the path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down there is another truth. You are not alone. Reverend Wayne Arneson.
Once again, welcome to West Shore Unitarian Universalist Church. We're always glad to see you here this morning and to welcome those of you who are staying warm at home and joining us remotely. As always, there is so much great stuff happening, so please make sure to look at your West Shore weekly order of service, also in your email, and see everything that's going on. There are so many wonderful ways to build community and get involved. And I am so honored and excited to hear from our two guest speakers today, two people who I know many of you know and love as well. Reverend Cheryl Costa is an ordained pagan priestess and an ordained Tibetan yogini. She's been a trans activist since the early 1980s. The State University of New York at Albany has taken her trans activist papers. And Callie Galligan, let's talk about Callie. She has always been an ally to the LGBTQ+ community and is the proud parent to a trans woman. The ugly rhetoric against trans people in recent years has pushed her to use her voice, calling out bigoted behavior and advocating for justice for transgender people. And we also know and love her as our current president of the Board of Trustees right here at West Shore. There's more information about Kelly in the order of service. So if you are here for the first time today and you don't mind letting us know, would you raise your hand? Anyone here who's a first timer? Welcome. We're so glad you're here. We're going to go into a couple of minutes of greeting time. At the end of the greeting time, I'll ring the bowl, and we will take that moment for our very special land acknowledgement. So please do, when you hear the bowl, pause, and let's sing that together. Thank you. Let's greet each other.
This morning's offering will go to Trans Ohio, an organization dedicated to protecting and advancing the right of trans, non-binary, intersex, and gender non-conforming people in Ohio. Trans Ohio serves as a networking bridge to other LGBTQ+ organizations, as well as offering programs and services that focus on the understanding and cultural awareness of the Ohio transgender community, and to help ensure that Ohio educational programs and services are inclusive and supportive of Ohio transgender issues, perspectives, and concerns. Trans Ohio provides social activities that are inclusive of all LGBTQ+ and ally communities, access to safe spaces, people, forums for confidential discussion, support, and local and national resources information. Additionally, Trans Ohio helps trans people with the cost of updating their identity documents. That process can cost as much as $500 and requires legal assistance. In addition to today's collection, Queers and Allies has been at a table in the rotunda collecting donations for the purpose of identity documents and those expenses for the last 3 weeks, and today will be the last day to donate there. And while I agree with Kathy Ross when she says we can't react every time Donald Trump says something, in the case of identity documents, we need to react, because it is more than likely that the non-binary marker on your passport, and in Ohio, your ability to change your birth certificate and your gender markers is going to be attempted to stop. So we need to help our trans friends change their identity documents sooner rather than later. West Shore has long served as a welcoming congregation, showing our support for the LGBTQ+ community in a myriad of ways. That support continues with the work of Transforum. Get it? Transforum, which is a non-binary trans support group that meets on the third Thursday of the month at 7 p.m. and is facilitated by Reverend Costa. Please share the word of that group as appropriate with your circles. The offering will now be gratefully taken and received.
I want to just do a special thank you to our guest musician, Hex Raymond, and everything you are hearing are her original compositions. Just beautiful, thank you. So today's homilies are given by these two powerful, loving members of our West Shore community. And I am personally so grateful to them to you, for your courage and your willingness to raise our awareness and spark our love in support of all those who are part of the transgender and gender nonconforming community. What does love call us to do in the face of unrelenting bullying and targeting of the trans community? Here in Ohio, what that targeting looks like is the onslaught of ads during the election that focused on fear and hate, on non-issues. The two big examples are the literally millions of dollars spent attacking transgender girls playing sports. One might assume that this onslaught, based on that onslaught, that it is a major Ohio issue. But did you know that when Ohio passed House Bill 68 earlier this year, which now bars trans students from taking part in female athletics, it affected fewer than 10 transgender students? Fewer than 10. The previous policy of the Ohio High School Athletic Association stated that trans girls wishing to compete on a girls' team must complete a minimum of 1 year of hormone treatment and demonstrate, by way of sound medical evidence, that she does not possess physical advantages. Common sense. So just let me ask you, does 11 million, roughly the population of Ohio, against 10 sound fair or kind? Nope. Thank you. Because that is what Ohio did, our legislators did. They focused our 10 million plus population on an issue that affects such a small number of young adults. And you know our hearts go out to those young people and those who continue to be impacted. And here's the second example. Recently, Governor DeWine signed Ohio's version of the bathroom bill. This bill requires both public and private K-12 schools and all Ohio universities and community colleges to prohibit non-gendered bathrooms and bans transgender students from using a bathroom that aligns with their gender identity. To be very clear, this doesn't just ban students from using bathrooms aligned to their gender identity, it makes it illegal for schools to have single-use, non-gendered bathrooms. You know, like the one that's right here, and the one that's back by the RE, and the ones that are probably in your home, I guess, unless you have one that's marked male and female, and you look at people's private parts before they go in. Don't tell me if you do, I don't want to know that, no. So it's really not about protecting children. We knew that. But the blatancy of it, I don't know if that's a word, but anyway, it's not protecting anyone. Not to mention that there is literally no evidence, zero, that trans people attacking girls in bathrooms is an issue. On the other hand, there is very real data, substantial evidence, that if a transgender girl in particular uses a men's restroom, she is nearly 50% more likely to face physical assault. That's the reality. So today, many trans people and their families live with the very real impact of these laws and are in fear of what comes next, especially since we know that the next target of the culture war is to restrict access to the hormones and other life-saving treatment that allows people to be their authentic self. And it will be done by stripping parents and young people of the right to make their own medical decisions in consultation with each other and their doctors. All right, a little bit of a twist here. How many of you have seen the movie Wicked? Okay, a lot of you, good. Or if you've read the book. In the story, the wizard, as a way to hold on to power, builds a campaign against animals who can talk and read and teach. This is before Elphaba, you know her as the Wicked Witch of the West, becomes an even better target. There is a brief scene in the movie where the goat professor is explaining how animals have been disappearing. This map appears with photos of the missing. When I saw this scene, my heart dropped. My first thought was, this is what is happening to our trans families and friends. They are being disappeared from Ohio and other states like it. So many families and individuals are having to make the agonizing decision on whether to stay or go. Many, including the trans person that I love, have already left. To me, all who are leaving are the unseen disappeared. Our invitation to you this morning, as you hear from Reverend Costa and Kelly, is to consider what love calls you to do. It may be difficult to fully understand gender dysphoria and gender nonconformity. You are invited into a conversation this morning, an ongoing journey of understanding. I know that the people in this room and virtually would never walk past a group of children pushing around another child. But if it were 100 children pushing around a single child, the question of how to help becomes more complex. And what about roughly 100,000 or 200,000 people being bullied by 11 million? It can feel overwhelming, and it can be hard to see the impact. It is easy for those folks to simply disappear with little notice. So thank you by being here with us today to learn, to love, and to help make sure that our trans community and family members and friends are noticed, are adored, and are supported in whatever decisions they make for their safety and for their joy.
Good morning. If you don't know me, my name is Cheryl Costa. I've been a member of the congregation for about 18 months. Each week at our services, we have sort of a mini ritual, which we just did, where we all shake hands and greet each other warmly. We shake hands with people we know, sometimes we get hugs, and we shake hands especially with the people with no badge or the people wearing orange badges, making them feel welcome in our congregation. After that ritual, we remain standing, and we sing the land acknowledgement. We come to this good morning remembering the journey of freedom. The land we are on was once another's. We mourn the legacies of oppression. Let's talk about that oppression. In 1540, Hernando de Soto's conquistadors landed on the coast of North America and began driving inward in their search for gold. They kept running into native tribes that had a third gender functioning within their culture. Conquistadors did not know what to make of this. The only word they could come up with was an anthropological term called burdash. It means submissive male whore. It's taken from a Persian term, bardash, which meant submissive kept boy. In their minds, that equated with sodomite. And in the spirit of the Spanish Inquisition, they exterminated the third genders in these villages. As a result, they fed the transgenders to wild dogs or burned them at the stake. The tribe considered these third genders a gift to their community. The conquistadors quickly realized this. They found out that by destroying the third genders, it would heavily demoralize every tribe they encountered. It became a common battle tactic that when dominating and oppressing a new tribe that they met, they first got rid of the third genders. The thing was, these tribes were recognizing these people as somebody special because they were born either with a physical malformation in their genitals or they showed an inclination towards a different social role within the community. The Smithsonian took these pictures in the 19th century. These are two-souled individuals. The two-souled is a term that's more modern now. Each tribe had their own name for it. If they were Lakota, they were called Winte. If they were called, numerous other tribes had other names for them. The Smithsonian took these pictures of third genders in the Native American community in the 19th century. These tribes had no contact with DeSoto's conquistadors, so they survived. It's very obvious these people are androgynous. Now, what most people don't know is there are over 100 indigenous tribes in our world today that have third gender people living within their tribes. So what I'm going to talk about next, that person. Your intimate questions are welcome at the deep dive. Let's explore a little personal journey. I'm going to keep this in the context of a fairy tale. He, who will not be dead named, we'll call him the little princess. People considered him extremely a gentle child. His maternal grandmother and 6 maternal aunts felt that the young boy had the temperament of a little girl. He was the boy who cried. Several aunts used to say, he'll cry at a Hallmark commercial. In adolescent years, the princess did not take part in boys' sports or engage in certain other things that boys of adolescence did. Because every morning when she got out of the shower, she would look at herself in the full-length mirror and say, that's not right. There's that inner feeling. People hear the term gender dysphoria. It says a sense of unfeeling. You look in the mirror and say, that's not right. Something deep in you says this. So she was frequently overwhelmed with this sense of unfeeling about the body she saw in the mirror. She went to the kingdom's libraries, the town library, and researched. She didn't know what she was. Then one day, on a television program called The Merv Griffin Show, he had a guest on by the name of Christine Jorgensen. Christine was a woman who had been a World War II GI and had undergone a sex reassignment surgical process in Scandinavia. In her day, Miss Jorgensen was a sensation. While appearing on the Merv Griffin Show, Miss Jorgensen used the word the princess had never heard, transsexual. Armed with that powerful word, the princess went back to the kingdom's library and began researching and trying to understand all that she could about transsexuals. It was still very rare. Only 3 places in the United States were doing the surgery. These days, you can't swing a cat and not hit a place that does it. Okay. She decided that she was going to have to get very smart about it. And the other thing she had to do was either get very smart and get the resources to change gender someday, or do like everybody was advocating to her, make a man out of yourself. So she joined the King's Air Force. And as you can see, she served in combat, okay? Got decorated, did all those wonderful things. Didn't make a man out of her. She knew that she had to do, okay, I told you that, I got ahead of myself. And then, okay, that didn't make a man out of her. Sorry, I was a little off track here. A few years later, she joined the King's Navy. She thought, well, if I hide behind a big, bushy Paul Bunyan beard, they won't recognize me as a princess. And they quickly figured it out. Her collateral duty, besides her intelligence work that she really did, she was a librarian. She took care of the books. And oh, by the way, Grandma taught her how to sew, and guess what? She became the ship's tailor, but she was always referred to as the seamstress. And many times, the former shipmates on that Facebook page still refer to me as the seamstress. And they used to come up to me and say, Costa, you're going to make somebody a good wife someday. Leaving the King's Navy, she pursued a university education in filmmaking and media writing, and quickly she landed a job in the computer industry making industrial movies. But when she made industrial films on weekdays, she made, I think there's another slide there, she made peace with her heart by experimenting with her new and her true nature. I think they took that slide out. Okay, they gave her every test. She went to psychiatrist, psychologist. Her company sent her to a psychologist. You're crazy, you're nuts. We're going to send you to a psychiatrist. He ran through a battery of tests and came back a perfectly healthy woman, took this test. Again, she had government contracts that she worked with. She had a security clearance higher than God. And they said, the Department of Defense said, we think you're crazy. We want you to go to a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist talked to her for 45 minutes, lit up a cigarette, sat back, took a drag, looked at her and said, you're saner than the people who sent you here. Ran her through another set of psychologicals, which confirmed the same thing. She should be a member of Mensa, and she's a nice, healthy woman. So she underwent gender change surgery. There should be slides for that. Okay. Oh, by the way, they kept telling her, hey, lady, you got a girl's brain, kid. Okay? So for the next 3 years, she took potions and had surgery and embraced her true presentation and became her authentic self. Her grandmother and 6 maternal aunts didn't blink. She felt that it suited. They all felt that it suited her. But with all good fairy tales, there has to be a dark side. Alas, the king and the queen were extremely upset. They thought the princess was raving mad. They cursed the royal doctors and the court counselors, and they wanted each of their heads, or at least stripped of their positions. Alas, the princess was banished from court, and that was 36 years ago. 4 years after she became her authentic self, she met a Native American medicine guy while she was at a conference, and over dinner, he made a remark to her, Miss Corporate 500, okay? I see you took a white man's solution to a spiritual problem. Oh, this threw her a curve, okay? His statement caught her off guard. Now she was confronted with yet another conflict of who she was and what she was. Sometime later, she was invited to a retreat in the high Jemez Mountains of New Mexico. She did not know these people. She was afraid they'd hurt her or kill her. So again, her native friend looked at the letter, made a few phone calls, came back to her and said, hey, this thing is legit, go. The night before she left, her Native American friend came to her and gave her a copy of a book called Spirit and the Flesh, and told her that she needed to read it on her flights and her layovers and be done with it before she got to New Mexico because her life depended on it. So, in Albuquerque, New Mexico, she was met at the gate by an Onondaga woman who she's known for years. And they got a quick bite to eat, and they drove up to northern New Mexico, got up in the high Jemez Mountains, and up there was a shamanic retreat, and there is a slide for this. There is a shamanic retreat, and they spent not there. Go back. The other way. Nope. I don't think, they did take one more slide out. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead and go back up to that. Okay, for the next 5 days in a high mountain retreat, they discussed what it was like being on a gender journey because who she was with looked at her the first day with another individual and said, we look like you look like us. We're the third genders, we're the two souls. The other wisdom she found out was the native tribes were close to nature. So they recognized that if a child was born with ambiguous genitals, that maybe this was something the gods wanted, native spirits. The other thing they realized was that sometimes kids, by the time they got to puberty, they were resonating with a social role not necessarily in alignment with their reproductive organs. This happened typically around 12 or 15 years old. And the child was given an opportunity to choose the life that they wanted within the tribe. Okay? In some tribes, they used to set up some brush in a circle, put the child in the circle, give them a bow or a basket, bow being man and basket being a woman's tool. And they would set it on fire. Said, choose before you get burned to death. Okay? She came back from the Jemez Mountains in New Mexico, greatly changed in ways that longtime friends and professional colleagues couldn't put their finger on. But to a person, they all agreed that she was profoundly settled and seemingly ready to take on a greater challenge in her life. Okay, 3 years later, a high Tibetan Lama came to town, met her, said, I know you. She picked her out of a crowd of 150 people and said, I know you. Holiness, I've not met you before. Not in this life. He says, of course not. 3-4 times in the last 400 years. Huh? Okay, so this took her on a 7-year journey exploring her deeper self in a Buddhist monastery. The goofy thing about it was, when you get in a Buddhist monastery, you start quieting your mind, and with the help of these lamas, she began remembering other lives. So, some people say, what is this transgender stuff? It is a soul that is trying to make sense out of this body because maybe they were something else in the previous life or in several previous lives. Okay? That's the spiritual problem. Okay. These days, okay, here we go. These days, this is what the doctors at the VA use to train people who are coming into the profession because they have a lot of trans vets down there. Okay? Some of the fiercest soldiers you've ever met, and they are so sweet when you see them in the proper attire. They are very lovely people. I use this to help train professionals. I made this up perfectly for the VA doctors to teach with. I advocate for trans people. I teach parents and loved ones and allies the challenges and stresses of the journey. Transness is not a whim. There is a deep, anchored feeling of not being in sync with the body. Amen. Thank you. Gender-affirming care has been shown to significantly reduce suicide rates among transgender and non-binary youth. Depression has been reduced by 60%. Suicide has been reduced by 73%. I tried to commit suicide 3 times when I was a teen. You just can't deal with it. According to a study by the Trevor Foundation, this 73% is a big deal. Now, if you ask me personally, state representatives, federal representatives have been told this. In the back of my mind, it feels like a scene out of Dickens. Wow, if we turn off the gender-affirming care, 73% of the trainees, up-and-coming trainees, will kill themselves. Yay! That's the attitude we think is going on there. The bottom line, it's messy. All right, nature is messy. The prevalence of intersex individuals is estimated to be about 1.7% of the population. This is roughly equivalent to the number of people who are redheads. Okay? This 1 to 2% means that out of every 100 births, 1 to 2 babies are born intersexed. That's with very obvious mistakes in their genitalia. Some of these things are not apparent, especially when they say to us, oh, yeah, well, you've got to be what your original birth certificate says. Mine was changed in 1990, and I asked the New York State statistics people, why did you change that? So, well, you had letters from your doctor. It was a mistaken diagnosis. Okay, have I bored you yet? Out of every 5,000 babies, approximately 85 out of 5,000 are born with a sexual variance. And some of these things don't appear until much later. There have been perfectly healthy-looking boys that grew breasts when they got transitioned into into adolescence. And then when they checked them out further, they found some of them had ovaries. Okay, and vice versa. Nature is messy, and if you grew up on a farm, you saw this. Let's return to the spiritual problem. I was raised a good Catholic boy. I always marveled at how people try to use Bible passages to condemn LGBT people and most especially trans people. So let's explore a couple of passages. Matthew 19:12 is interesting. See, I always hate it when the people that don't like us always quote Leviticus. They always report the stuff from the Old Testament. Eye for an eye kind of stuff, okay? Remember, Jesus was the new law. For there were eunuchs who were born that way, and eunuchs who had been made that way by others, and others who chose to live like eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. Those who can accept it should accept it. Matthew 19:12. Matthew 25:40. The king replied, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of these least of these brothers or sisters of mine, you did for me." John, a new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you. You must love one another. Micah 6:8. He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? Act justly and with love and mercy and walk humbly with your God. This verse calls for justice, mercy, humility, and values, and is applied to treat all people, including trans people, as equals. Now, that Buddhist Lama, I got very deep into what they call Vajrayana Buddhism. And after he picked me out of this crowd, I got an audience with him a few days later because I was Miss Corporate 500 was trying to figure out, I used to be somebody else in a monastery in Tibet. And he looked at me and he says, I see you as a yogini. You have invoked the power of unbridled, enlightened, feminine Dakini energy, that of the divine form of Tara. Then he looked at me and says, tens of thousands of monks in Asia will not become enlightened in this lifetime because they won't embrace their female energy, because their cultural view is that a womanly birth is an inferior birth. He said, and you've embraced this energy in the West. A year later, I was ordained a Buddhist nun, and the head of the Tibetan Orthodox tradition at that time named me Dawa Donma. In Tibetan means moon Tara. Green Tara is the Buddhist goddess and Dakini who is known for compassion, service, and protection. I am here to serve. I and others like me have overcome the lie or the illusion of the physical. I've been male. I've embraced female energy and female wisdom. I suppose that makes me a they or them. Finally, people ask me how I define myself. I say it this way. I am not defined by this body's DNA. I am not defined by somebody's religion. I am not defined by someone's politics. I am a unity being inside this machine of flesh. Only I define what I am. Amen. I am the peace unity brings. returning to the final passages of the land acknowledgement, final two stanzas. Healing is our way forward. Joy is the birthright of all. Healing is our way forward. Joy is the birthright of all. Bright blessings upon all of you.
And now please join us. All are invited to come forward to share from the heart in our ritual of For All That Is Our Lives. These are the joys and sorrows of our lives. In Reverend McCarr's absence, these will be shared with Kathy Strasser, head of our pastoral care team, and held with care until Reverend McCarr's return.
Good morning. For those who don't know me, my name is Kelly Galligan, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. Of the many roles I've held or hold in my life, everything from sister, daughter, martial artist, project manager, beekeeper, and this church's board president, the role that brings me the most joy is that of mom. My daughter is a trans woman. Ooh, I gotta get through this first paragraph. Watching her navigate her transition and the day-to-day of her life leaves me in awe. She does the footwork needed to lead a life of integrity and grace. It's both humbling and fills me with intense pride. Despite that lead-in, I'm not telling her story today. It is, after all, her story to share as she sees fit with those she feels safe with. One of the roles I didn't list but have long held is that of ally. I've always been a supporter of the LGBTQ+ community, both before I joined West Shore and definitely since. I have beloved friends and family who are members of the queer community. I have walked as an angel in the Pride Parade numerous times and currently serve as a co-chair with Kathy Little of Queers and Allies. I'm the token ally. I fly a pride flag at home, and I have a Black Lives Matter sign in the window of my karate school. I've had trans and gay students at this school. Being an ally and using my voice and privilege is not new to me. I speak out often, whether it's on social media with my elected representatives or in conversation with friends. I once asked Sherrod Brown at a meet and greet to promise me that an ugly anti-trans bill that was being floated in the Senate would not pass. He promised, and it didn't. The recent rise in anti-trans ugliness that Terri referenced, as well as women losing their right to bodily autonomy, has had me thinking and doing a deeper dive into the intersectionality between trans rights and women's rights. Intersectionality is a concept that recognizes that gender inequality is one part of a complex system of oppression, that the rights of trans people are women's rights. Or, as I like to say, none of us are free until all of us are free. Thank you. So how do trans rights affect women's rights and vice versa? Trans rights affect women's rights via racism and transphobia. Racism informs transphobia, which then informs sexism. It is yet another form of othering done to keep people at odds with each other and at the fringes of society. Trans rights affect women's rights by enforcing gender stereotypes. Limiting the freedom of trans people and non-binary people can worsen conditions for all women by reinforcing gender stereotypes. For example, we are currently seeing a resurgence of trad wives. Have y'all seen this on social media? It's a return to more traditional female roles. Stay-at-home moms who bake bread, make their own yogurt, and live a Pinterest-worthy life. In addition to the trad wives trend, we are also seeing an uptick in people policing what it means to look female enough in order to use public restrooms. Women who are cisgender but may not appear feminine enough, whatever that means, are being accosted on their way into restrooms and being asked to prove that they are real women. Women must be allowed to choose whatever role they want within their families, as well as our appearance. It is a choice, not something that should be or can be mandated or policed by anybody else. Trans rights affect women's rights by impacting transgender women's experiences. Transgender women face discrimination, violence, systemic barriers in healthcare, employment, and safety. Cisgender women face these same problems. These barriers are on the rise. Stick a pin in the safety and healthcare pieces of this. I'm coming back to it. Feminists that embrace intersectionality should integrate both and neither frameworks into all aspects of identity. Not only is there no conflict between demanding rights for women and for all transgender people, advances in trans rights hold a specific promise for women's liberation. By tearing down laws and policies based on gender stereotypes, we can create the opportunity for each of us to determine our own life story. I believe that to be a true inclusive feminist, you must be a trans-inclusive feminist. To be a true feminist, one must be intersectional and advocate for the rights of all women, regardless of their gender identity or biological sex. None of us are free until all of us are free. Let's return to the topic of safety and the intersectionality between trans women and cisgender women. The number of trans people who were murdered between 2017 and 2023 has doubled. While Black trans women represent only 13% of the trans community, they were 3/4 of the murder victims. 73% of trans murder victims were killed with a gun. 1 in 4 women will be sexually assaulted over the course of their life. 90% of those assaults are done by a domestic or intimate partner. The call is coming from inside the house. The most dangerous time in a woman's life, anybody know? When she's pregnant. 81% that are murdered by an intimate partner with a gun. In other words, women, whether they be cisgender or transgender, are not safe in our society. We'll leave the conversation about gun violence and gun control for another day, but there is a direct correlation between our safety and those who hold guns. Terri referenced ads that were running during the election which have a commonality. Can you name it? All the ads targeted one group, trans women. Not trans men, trans women. The ads and rhetoric were tied to protecting women, but we all know that's a cover story. Now pair the loss of autonomy that the recent legislation in Ohio takes from trans women with the fall of Roe v. Wade, and the number of bills in states, including Ohio and across the country, that attempt to legislate our bodies and our choices. Again, these bills are not targeting men, just women. And women are dying because healthcare providers are afraid to help. Legislators would rather see women die than allow us the freedom to control our bodies and our choices. See the connection? How cisgender rights and trans women rights are inextricably tied together. You cannot have one without the other. None of us are free until all of us are free. So what do we do with all of this? It's heavy, and man, it hurts my mama heart. And it's so very scary. After the election, I saw a message that said, "It is no longer enough to be an ally. We must become abolitionists." While the poster was speaking about racial inequality, and the term abolitionism refers to fighting against enslavement of Black and brown bodies, the concept applies to the intersectional fight of trans and women's rights. Being an ally is not enough anymore. It's time to engage in the fight and become radical allies. Is it hard? Absolutely it is. Will some people be upset with us? For sure. Is it the morally right thing to do? I believe it is. This is not a fight I can walk away from. For my daughter's sake, as well as for the future of all female bodies. None of us are free until all of us are free. How do we fight? We arm ourselves with facts. We talk about how trans kids are not having transgender affirming surgeries during recess. My God, what a gift that would be. Go to school, have your surgery, you don't have to pay for it, come home, you're done, right? If only it were that simple. We won't even talk about the complexity of the surgery they're claiming happens at recess. So, these kids are not receiving hormone replacement therapy. Prepubescent kids don't have hormones to replace, right? That biological process has not started yet. We talk about how hormone replacement therapy for trans women is the same hormone therapy that's been in place for decades for menopausal women. We talk about how puberty blockers are the same treatment that's been in place for ages for precocious puberty. We talk about how using a person's requested pronouns, and we all have them, and their requested name reduces the risk of suicide by 40%. We talk about how trans women are not assaulting other women in the bathroom, and we already have laws on the books for assault. We talk about how trans women athletes don't have an unfair advantage in sports. The opposite is true. We talk about the women who are dying because they can't get reproductive health care. We talk about the murder rates for both trans and cisgender women. In other words, silence is not golden. We have to speak up. When we speak up, we stand on the side of love. We show our support for our trans family when we use our voice. They need and deserve our love. I want to make a special call to action to the men among us. We need y'all. We need your voice and your advocacy. We need your privilege. It is no longer enough to be a quiet feminist. You need to use your voice, your power, your privilege, and join this fight. Our lives are literally depending on you. None of us are free until all of us are free.
Our closing hymn. Please join me. We are answering the call to love. Boy, have we heard some heavy stuff today. Listen to your heart. What does love call you to do? There are so many ways to be there for one another. Being a truth sayer, being an ally, marching, raising money, loving one another. Thank you, and as we go on together, maybe remember that we are held together by the unwavering bonds of human connection. Blessed be. Please join me in saying our chalice words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry with us until we meet again.